Fi. How are we?
I'm very well. Leigh, how are you?
I'm grand. I'm currently drinking tea with almond milk in it, which is deeply upsetting. But unfortunately my milk smelled weird, so I had to borrow almond milk from Jack, my housemate.
This is really upsetting. I won't tell anyone in your family that you ever drank tea with almond milk in order for you not to get excommunicated from Ireland.
I mean, I've been known to enjoy an oat, but there's just something about almond that just feels wrong.
I feel like your granny could manage the concept of you drinking oat milk, but I'm just not sure if a nut milk would push her over the edge.
Yeah, I think she'd be like, oh, basically like porridge and tea, fine. Like two of the most Irish things ever. But almond milk, I think, would just be too bourgeois.
Yeah, definitely. Are we excited for this week's episode?
I am so excited by the title alone.
I as soon as I read the title, I was just like, this is going to be my favourite one yet. The title of episode 5 of season 1 of The West Wing is just The Crackpots and These Women.
We should say, welcome back to Queer Gals Watch The West Wing.
Yeah, before our excitement takes over us.
Before the excitement takes over about the crackpots and the women.
My two favourite things. So thanks for joining us again. Leigh and I are going sort of episode by episode through The West Wing in order to, in some way, learn the wild world of American politics.
Yeah, and just try and block out that Trump is going to be the Republican nominee for president in the 2024 election.
And also just kind of have some fun with our friends from Quality TV in the 90s and noughties. And if this is your first time listening, welcome. Come on in.
Please. We've had so much fertile ground for discussion already in episodes 1 through 4. So please go back and enjoy. So let's just dive into Josh's rolled up shirt sleeves and just be like, everything's going to be okay.
Hold me.
Hold me, Josh.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm terrified and I don't even understand half of the things that are happening in American politics, which is kind of why we started this thing. So with that in vain, shall we just continue to reduce everything in this television show to funny little bits?
To fashion and blow dries.
Yeah. Okay, so episode 5. I think we should just dive straight into the recap because it's a great episode. It feels very much like the show has found its stride at this point.
Yes.
And we know enough about the characters to I feel like Aaron Sorkin is really indulging in giving quite a lot of character work in this episode.
Yeah.
For example, we just open on the boys playing basketball, just shooting some hoops outside the White House.
The boys.
Just the lads in there.
Just shooting some hoops.
Just with
bros
the president.
Being bros, you know?
just Toby Ziegler shit talking the president of the United States whilst both of them play, let's be honest, some mediocre basketball.
I do just immediately need to jump in with the athleisure game from everyone is stunning. I never thought I'd be so excited to see men in sweats.
I think it's because the American, I would say late 90s, early noughties kind of athleisure wear is very much kind of quite a heavy sweatpant and then a hoodie but with a basketball vest over the top.
I believe that Toby is wearing a hoodie with a cutoff arms.
I know, and listener, I did not hate that.
I didn't hate it. I normally would despise. I normally would be get that heinous garment away from me in the name of all that is holy. But on Toby Ziegler, I was like, hon, it is working for you.
I was like, should I cut the arms off one of my hoodies? Is this the next stage? I will say that Josh in a vest,
confidently in a wife beater in front of his boss and his boss's boss, the President of the United States.
I think, and I say this with respect to most men, a vest is a hard thing to pull off.
Truly.
That's all. That's just a fact. I would also just like to quickly state for the record, Leigh, if I may, this kind of five-a-side, shooting basketball, very cute, quite fun and sexy. English guys playing five-a-side football, not in any way sexy at all. In fact, physically makes me feel ill.
I also do question, like, why none of the girls were invited. Like, why is this a boys only event? Like, why is CJ not there?
CJ would be absolutely schooling them.
Yeah, that's so true.
Mrs. Landingham just scoring a 3-pointer. I used to shoot a bit of hoop back at Sarah Lawrence.
Oh, so good.
Oh, dear. I would also just like to mention that there's quite a lot of trash talk in this game. But because they're all like highly intellectual, it's all like kind of based around like poetry and quite a lot of like elaborate kind of like metaphor.
And the poets will write that in the battle between his angels and his demons, blah, 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 blah. Like
we should, guys, let's keep it succinct, you know. But I do think we have an iconic line from the president in do you want to play or write my eulogy?
Iconic.
Which is just a solid comeback for Toby's trash talk. We dive further into Jed Bartlett's inability to lose anything and his incredibly competitive nature, because his side are losing. And so he brings on a substitute who he describes as a guy called Rodney Grant, who works for like the president's physical fitness department or some sort of made up job. And it turns out that character like used to play basketball at Duke. You can't say Duke when you're talking about the American university. I feel like you have to say Duke. But a really fun cameo for Juwan Howard, who was in fact an NBA player who was playing for the Washington Wizards at that time. So like, what an iconic cameo for that guy.
So iconic, and I love how short it makes all of our leading men look.
So short. And
so
like
good.
President Bartlett like hides behind him like a little toddler behind like their parents.
And appears to kind of like sniff his armpit at one point. Like he kind of is like up against him like a kitty cat, like circling. And I love that energy from President Bartlett.
But it does feel like it would have been a weird day of filming for that basketball player. Just him being like, hey guys, I'm gonna like go and do a cameo on this like new TV show. Weird day though. Those guys were kind of really intense. We also get an anecdote that Toby and CJ once played Bartlett in tennis doubles, and he just asked Steffi Graf to
but claimed that it wasn't Steffi Graf, just like a woman who worked for, I think, like the German consulate who happened to look a lot like Steffi Graf. Also, I could not be more obsessed with the idea of Toby and CJ as mixed doubles partners.
I think we've been robbed of that like cutaway scene, because
100%.
I would pay money to watch that scene. I think I speak for us all when I say at some point in the West Wing, I would like to see CJ do sports.
100%. 100%.
Just like Alison Janney in a tennis outfit.
All we've gotten thus far is like her opening scene where she fell off a treadmill, and I just feel like she deserves better. She's an athletic woman, clearly.
Yeah, understood. So we conclude our basketball match and we head into the West Wing. And right off the bat, Josh and Donna, they're back at it again, Leigh.
Flirting to high heaven.
The flirting is unbelievable. And something that I would like to raise is, what are their colleagues saying? Like, what's the conversation at the water cooler and at the printer?
Like, we've all had that pub job where there's just two people who flirt outrageously with each other behind the bar, and you're like trying to get round them to pull a couple of pints, and it's just like extremely inconvenient, let alone that being the West Wing. I feel like there must be conversations being had being like, would they ever give it up? Would they ever cop on to themselves? Donna opens the interaction by saying, Donald hasn't called me. And Josh responds to this by saying, I think you need to like address how much interest I actually have in the Gomers that you date. I didn't know what Gomers meant, so I looked it up, and it is military slang for an inept or stupid colleague, especially a trainee.
And that is like an unbelievable read on the quality of men that Donna is dating. But it also confirms what we have been guessing up to this point, which is that Josh isn't cool with Donna dating anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is good enough for Donna because, oops, maybe he's the person that's good enough for Donna.
Correct.
So I just kind of need them to just get over themselves, because at some point I don't think I can do a whole season of this, Leigh.
I'm concerned that we're up for several seasons of this, Fiona.
Sigh. Okay. Or maybe I do need to get over it. Okay. Into the meat of the episode. Or should I say the cheese of the episode? Because it's Block of Cheese Day, which is a new thing I have learnt about because of this episode. And wow, oh wow, do I have questions about Andrew Jackson and his block of cheese.
Yeah. So this was a real thing. On February 22nd, 1837, President Jackson had a 1,400-pound block of cheese hauled into the main foyer of the White House for an open house with thousands of citizens and his staff, where they discussed the issues of the day while carving off slabs of cheddar, which frankly sounds like a lovely day out.
I was going to say, like, it's bonkers, but actually kind of like, I would go to that.
Yeah.
If someone was like, unlimited cheese and you get to moan. Those are two of my favourite things.
Yeah. I mean, like, a kind of crazy vibe from President Jackson, but like, I'm here for it. Obama recreated this virtually in both 2014 and 2015. The announcement of it on the White House blog at the time read, "Big Block of Cheese Day is back and it's feta than ever." For the second year in a row, we thought it would be a Gouda idea to reunite a certain cast of characters to help us bring back the second annual Big Block of Cheese Day at the White House.
You sent me that there's like a corresponding video that's like a promo video for it, and you sent it to me, and I spiraled because it is one of the most batshit videos I have ever seen. It's incredible because they have so many characters from the West Wing come back and kind of do like this little kind of like skit.
Yeah. And I love, and they've got Charlie, they've got Josh. And then at one point they're like, is that Janny? And it is just Alice and Janny.
Yeah. President Bartlett turns up. Mm-hmm. And also a character which I think we meet in later seasons, who is played by the actor Joshua Malina. So we've got that to come. There's a new character alert at some point.
Fun.
And that he was an actor that was just up for the sort of block of cheese madness. They gave Alice and Janny a lot of feta-based jokes.
Yeah.
And that's a crime.
Yeah, I think they were like, who can we count on to do the heavy lifting of like the more groan-inducing cheese puns? And they were like, the only person, in fact, who has a hope in hell of pulling that off is, in fact, Alice and Janny.
Yes. And you know that she just read that little bit of script and was like, well, that's terrible, but you know I'm going to sell it.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a really great concept. So good on Obama for bringing back Andrew Jackson's Cheese Day. And I do kind of love it for the West Wing as well. I do have like one thing I would like to raise, Leigh. And I don't know how you feel about this, having lived quite a long time in America. But what is it about Americans like harking back to like a legitimately insane thing that some people did like several hundred years ago? So they'll be like, oh, it's Rattlesnake Day here in Oklahoma, where we recall the day in 1798 that the rattlesnakes were driven out of the city, and we do the rattlesnake parade.
Yes. I was actually having this discussion with my girlfriend last night, who incidentally also lived in America for several years, although she is English, which, as with yourself, you know, is not her fault. She can't be blamed for it.
Thank you.
But we were talking about it because we were obviously watching Sister Wives, which is our favorite viewing of an Eve. And we were talking about why Americans are so obsessed with like very minute kind of pieces of history that are not actually that long ago. And I think it's basically that they will do absolutely anything to avoid talking about the absolute horrors inflicted on Native Americans by the formation of the United States. And so in order to avoid ever having to touch on that, they will find like the most cutesy, kind of fun, kind of zany episodes from history and be like, oh my God, the origins of America are so cute and fun, guys. And then
zany
it's like,
is definitely the word. And it's also a word that I really hate. So it's a perfect descriptor for this.
Yeah. And it's just like this kind of mirage or smokescreen to avoid talking about the fact that ultimately, you know, it's all stolen land.
Hey, as a British person, I can't really speak on that, you know.
Yeah.
The country I was born in did that to most of the world.
Yeah.
Imperialism, eh?
Yeah.
What a horrible history. Before we dive into atrocities.
Before I spiral quite deeply, let's move
atrocities
on.
Committed across the world. Let's talk a little bit more about Andrew Jackson and his block of cheese. So everyone is very against the block of cheese day idea in this kind of little meeting that our core group are having. Sam is very unhappy. Toby is very unhappy. Toby, in fact, says to Leo, who is very excited about block of cheese day, he says, Leo, wouldn't our time be better spent plotting a war against a country that can't possibly defend itself against us? and Leo just responds with, we can do that later, Toby. Right now I'm talking about President Andrew Jackson.
Yeah.
So I feel like the crackpots and women that we hear about in the episode title are going to be the quote-unquote passionate Americans that our characters will be meeting. I am enjoying Leo's energy surrounding Block of Cheese Day. I feel like it's reassuring. It seems he's in a good place. I'm still very mad at Jenny, the divorce.
We've completely lost the thread of their separation, and I'm hoping that we do kind of circle back round.
Me too. So we kind of hit straight after this onto our second biggest plot point, which is sort of our B plot, which is Josh has a meeting with Jonathan Lacey from the NSC, which
we briefly touched on in the episode where we dived into who even is the vice president. And we talked about it's the National Security Council, which is comprised of, obviously the president, the vice president, and then several other kind of the Secretary of State, all of the people with the highest security clearances that need to make the big bad decisions.
Yeah. And so Jonathan Lacey provides Josh with a little laminated card, basically telling him where to go in the case of an international emergency where they need to get the president et al. On a plane or go into a bunker. So big deal for Josh.
Yeah.
Big deal.
Also something that makes sense for his title as Deputy Chief of Staff. It wouldn't make sense for Leo to be there on his own as the Chief of Staff. It makes sense that he'd need his right-hand man with him in that scenario.
For sure. And it's an amazing moment of recognition for the work that he does. But of course it does in fact instigate him having a crisis.
Yes, because he's immediately and what about my staff?
Immediately he's what about Donna?
Mm-hmm.
Just tell her how you feel. Tell her how you feel, Josh, for the love of God. So I feel like we just throw the stone into the pond here, and there will be ripples throughout this episode of just Josh's breakdown regarding the fact that he's special and his friends aren't. His words, not mine.
It's very kind of Harry Potter chosen one from him.
Yes.
Not to bring She Who Shall Not Be Named into the conversation, the transphobe to end all transphobes, but moving on. Before I say anything else, if I'm feeling frisky this morning, I am throwing out controversial statement after controversial statement.
Do you think, is this the impact of just discussing American politics and such? You just become wildly more radical as you learn more. We meet President Bartlett having a kind of dry run of a press conference, which I love because I love that we do basically theatre acting games with President Bartlett.
We're hot seating President Bartlett.
We're hot seating. And Sam is trying to run President Bartlett through some questions and is kind of giving him some notes. And Bartlett, as we know, does not take notes well. He's just being quite a petulant, kind of the actor in the notes session that's just well, the reason that I made that choice was because so-and-so did this thing, so I felt like I had to do that.
Yes, Mr. Bartlett too, President Bartlett, is also feeling frisky this morning and ready to make a few controversial statements.
Honestly, this episode, Bartlett is on one. He's a frisky little gentleman. It's very obvious that there's a feeling of kind of animosity between Bartlett and Toby.
Yes.
And this is all circling back to the legislation that got passed in the previous episode with gun control.
Yeah.
Because I think Toby is trying to say it's better for us to say, look, the bill isn't as strong as it could be, but it's a start. And Bartlett's saying, I just think we shouldn't say anything negative about it whatsoever.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of contention between the two of them, cueing Bartlett to say, "Is it time for my 10 a.m. scolding?" Which is just like really camp bitchery, and I love it.
It would be at home on Drag Race, this whole scene.
Very much so. But I think Toby's being quite reasonable. I think I would toe the same line as Toby, being like, look, we can only do what we can do. The bill is a start, but it's maybe not the end of the work we want to do on gun control during like this presidential term.
To make another controversial statement, because as I say, I am feeling frisky this morning, Toby is very much giving in this scene like your energy as historically when you've been a stage manager or a show manager dealing with a slightly out of control director, being like, that fundamentally cannot happen. Health and safety. I'm seeing lawsuits. Can we just take a step back? You can't do that.
Please,
unfortunately, sir, you cannot do that. And it is always, sir. Toby just actually, in general, has real stage manager energy through the whole series.
He does. He has real stage manager energy. Like, give that man like a walkie-talkie and an earpiece, for the love of God.
Yeah,
and like a tool belt, some LX tape, perhaps. Okay, so let's get into Block of Cheese Day proper. So we start off with Sam. Sam has his first kind of like passionate American, who is Bob from United States Space Command, played stunningly by the actor Sam Lloyd, who aka Ted from Scrubs. Literally this actor is just the best at playing kind of like crazy weirdo characters, and he does not miss in this episode. He does not miss.
No.
Sam sees no need to be polite to this gentleman in any way. Bob is like, we're a little nerdy, I admit. And Sam replies with, you camouflage it well with your clothing. A statement that is so unbelievably rude that I would slap a bitch for saying something like that to me.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck are you doing, Sam? Like, you are a professional.
It all comes back to the fact that Sam is in fact in love with himself. And it also, I love the implication therefore that like Sam is a fashionista. Like he's able to critique others' aesthetics. Because he's a cool guy, you know, he's just a cool guy.
He's just cool, you know, he's just cool. Like he wears nice clothes, like the ladies, they love him.
Yeah. Although in 10 to 15 years, he will come to regret the frameless glasses.
I mean, I would say like 1998 to 2005, really bleak time for wearers of spectacles in general.
Can confirm, as like an awkward child who very much was like half blind at that time before I had laser eye surgery, all of the photographs of me during this time are ruined and dead to me because I look so heinous in all of the glasses that were available for me to purchase at this time.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, the other little tidbit we get in this, because Sam is obviously shredding this guy to pieces, is he says, like, don't we have enough trouble with the First Lady and her Ouija board?
I need to know everything. Why are you withholding Stockard Channing from us, Aaron?
Where is FLOTUS?
Where is FLOTUS? Why is she in Pakistan? What's going on? Why is she in Pakistan alone? Like, when has a FLOTUS ever made a solo trip to Pakistan? I'm so confused.
But the Ouija board, Leigh.
This
isn't the only reference. This is like women and their necks from the previous episode. But like Aaron Sorkin just decides that he really likes like a really rogue thing and then just has everyone say it. Like multiple characters in this episode talk about the First Lady and her Ouija board, but no one gives us a single anecdote about it.
I wonder if it's to do with, there were rumors when Hillary Clinton was being like hit really hard with her public image when she was the First Lady. And I think around the time of the Monica Lewinsky scandal, there was reporting that she had some kind of spiritualist that she was working with. And it was like all over the tabloids for a while that Hillary was like communicating with demons. And like, as someone who in a dark time post breakup seriously considered having a shamanic healing, I just think that Hillary Clinton and all women who have like low points with tarot card readers just need to be left alone.
We go there at specific times in our lives when we need answers, and we should be respected for that.
Truly, leave the First Lady and her Ouija board alone. She's clearly going through something.
I could not agree more. I mean, you have actively bought me tarot card readings for my birthdays in order for me to just like plan out the next year of my life. So yeah, I'm with FLOTUS on this one. Just let the woman do her thing. If she wants to commune with some spirits, so be it.
Yeah.
We have a little C plot going in this episode, which is Larry Posner and the film industry, which is kind of a storyline that they've sort of given to Mandy to give her just anything to do because she's completely obsolete at this point. But it does provide us with like some sort of more fun anecdotes. Yeah. So there's a kind of planned trip to Malibu for some sort of fundraiser that's being run by Larry Posner, who I believe is a director from Hollywood, fictional.
Correct, yeah.
During the primaries, he did another fundraiser or kind of event.
Yeah.
And CJ refers to this by saying that at that party, Roberto Benigni, a real person,
a real director,
like a really famous director,
in 1997 received 2 Oscar nominations.
Yeah, that Roberto Benigni pushed her into a swimming pool.
And thus turned her into just a 6-foot wet girl in a Donna Karan dress.
Sublime. Sublime. Again, we've been robbed of that cutaway scene. I can't even engage in the concept of CJ like climbing out of a pool in a ball gown. I can't.
At like a campaign event.
Stunning. It's just so good. And I do have to say, like, for all of his absolute batshit choices, Aaron Sorkin is just perfect at these like really specific character details. Yeah, you're like 100% that happened to that character. 100%. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I can see it so easily in my mind. So props to Aaron for that. Let's move on to Bartlett being frisky. So he's having this kind of very high quality economic chat with some politicians, journalists, I'm not sure.
With some economists. He's trying to decide his stance on, so every year the American government has to pass the budget.
Oh yeah, okay, that makes sense.
And that's coming around at this time. So he's like working out with these economists what his stance on the budget should be, basically.
Yeah, and he is basically coming across as a very good economic strategist.
Yeah. It's giving like Elle Woods being like, well, you got in the shower?
Yeah, it's very much the cross-examination of chutney.
Yeah, yeah.
I love that we have this moment of like, okay, cool, like this is probably one of the reasons why he was elected. Mm-hmm. He knows his stuff. He's really great at like the kind of thinking about the long-term economic prospects for America. Oh wait, let's quickly undermine this by getting him really excited about making chili.
Yes.
He receives a little note to say that his daughter is in town. Cue him literally dismissing all the economists and just saying to the room at large, I'm going to make some chili.
So excited. I mean, it is very much giving like the dad/husband who has one dish that he cooks.
Confirmed.
And like whenever he makes that one dish that he knows how to make, everyone has to be like, wow, you made a meal.
And be like, so tasty. Well done, Jed, for making what is ostensibly quite a simple dish.
It's a weekday dish.
It's a weekday meal. It's not a special occasion meal.
No.
But anyway, I think it's incredibly camp how he just then like walks through the hallways of the White House shouting about how he's going to make chili, but also means we're going to get to meet the president's daughter.
Very fun.
Very exciting. He walks into the Oval Office and just like, it's just sort of like waxing lyrical about my friends, my daughter, my beer and some chili. Like he's a maniac. Poor sweet Charlie comes in and is like, sir, like, you know that the First Lady doesn't basically want you eating red meat. To which Bartlett responds by just saying, the First Lady's in Pakistan and I can eat whatever I want. Again, no context as to why she's in Pakistan. Why doesn't anyone know why the First Lady's in Pakistan?
Yeah, surely if it's for some like official function, it should be clear that she's like, oh, she's like connecting with her equivalent in that none of that.
No information.
Unless she's literally just gone to like do yoga, like the white woman she truly is. Yeah.
That's possible. Clearly her husband doesn't know. He then briefs his team that everyone's going to have chili that evening and everyone is going to have a nice time because he's in charge and he's the president, which leads me on to, I think, one of my favorite Bartlett quotes ever, which is, "You see how benevolent I can be when everybody just does what I tell them to do," which I think I might bring into my own vernacular as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that would be an excellent directing moment from you, just whenever actors actually take the notes that you give.
I think so. I would love that. We come back to Larry Posner and his fundraiser. So we kind of really get into it with the whole team on this one. And it becomes actually quite like a weird, heated moral debate, which I just find this whole, and I think it was like a huge thing in the 90s because obviously there was like Columbine and everything. And so people were worried about gratuitous violence in films causing these outbreaks of violence. It's like, no, hun, like the movies are not the problem. The guns are the problem, guys. Like, please. I just find this whole debate about like moral leadership over entertainment by politicians so patronizing and paternalistic and elitist, and I just find the whole debate insufferable. Could not agree more. You've put it perfectly. I mean, it's interesting to listen to, but I'm not sure that I would rather have it than like I just think it's quite a weak C plot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Also, I kind of feel like it's Aaron Sorkin like going on a bit of a rant.
Yeah.
Because I want to know, so they talk about how like Larry Posner is this director and his films are like full of sex and violence and basically they're not very good films. So like, do we want to be associated with Larry because he's not putting like quality content out there?
Yeah.
And I want to know who Aaron Sorkin is thinking of in his mind for Larry Posner.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
like who's he being shady about? Because he's being shady about someone.
He's being shady about someone, definitely. This is definitely based off of like a real person. I completely can believe that. I think obviously we're biased because we are artists. And obviously there's a different relationship between moral values in terms of art in the US versus, I think both of us are probably, even though I obviously lived in America for a long time, I think my views on art and what art contributes to society are much more European than...
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah.
Than American. And I think coming from Ireland where theatre specifically was like such a point of protest and it's always been at the centre of political action, I just kind of feel like politicians have absolutely no place in prescribing what's in the arts and what's not.
No. And like in the UK, obviously we had like quite fierce censorship in theatre as well. And that became like the catalyst for so much like incredible writing to be made about essentially why politicians have no place deciding what we should be putting on stages or I suppose in modern day on our screens.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in that sense, it's interesting. But in the sense of like an episode about Bartlett making chili and Block of Cheese Day, this really feels like it has no place. Especially when Toby just like very casually compares Bartlett to his face to Joe McCarthy.
Crazy shots fired.
Crazy behavior from Toby.
It's a man at the end of his tether. I mean, like, I think that's a real low point for your relationship with your boss when you're like, McCarthyism.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing that I do know a little bit about. So I did learn a little bit about McCarthyism for my GCSE history. But we did kind of focus mainly on like Arthur Miller and Marilyn Monroe and like that kind of set. So I feel like we didn't like fully get into it. You know?
And also, obviously, we had the iconic series of lectures in uni on Brecht and how, to quote our lecturer at the time, Brecht was a real dude. And what I am obsessed with in his testimony to the McCarthy committee, when he was questioned by the McCarthy committee, he pretended not to be able to speak English. Which is so iconic.
It's such a flex and I love that for him. Just like him really confidently like speaking absolutely fluent, incredible English up until the point he gets in the dock and then he's like, it's literally shrug emoji like, guess you have to get a translator in for me. I couldn't possibly understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, if our lecturer called Brecht a dude, I'm going to say that Brecht is a absolute hun.
Yes. Yeah, so I think in conclusion, we get where Toby's coming from, but the whole thing got very off-piste very quickly.
Yeah.
Cue us circling back to Josh's National Security Council breakdown.
Mm-hmm.
Josh has decided to go and talk to his friend, Sam, about it. And we get a moment with Kathy.
Yeah.
Kathy's back, Sam's EA. And we have a little moment where we deep dive into how the men in this show feel about their EAs. Because
I love these like emotional chats, like these emotional trek-ins between Josh and Sam are the real cornerstone of the show for me. Mm-hmm. Just like two guy pals talking about their feelings. I couldn't love it more.
Yes. So Josh says, "You're close with Kathy, aren't you?" To which Sam replies, "I haven't seen her naked, if that's what you're asking."
Bros be broing.
Just bros be broing. I mean, to be fair to Josh, he said, "No, that's not what I was asking." Serious fuckboy energy from Sam. They're like, "No, why?" He was not asking if you slept with her.
He just like, Sam is just like so insecure that he just needs everyone to know that he's like a virile young man at every opportunity.
And like, if he wanted to, he could.
Yes, absolutely. But then he goes on to describe his relationship with Kathy as, she's like my younger sister, but she gets paid and she frightens me, which I just think is how everyone should feel about their EA.
100%. If anything, that would be like a top line on an executive assistant's CV, like
100%.
A quote from my boss.
Yeah.
But then it gets really awkward because Josh is speaking to Sam as if Sam has got one of the cards from the NSC, but Sam hasn't got one of the cards. So then Josh has more of a crisis because he realizes none of his colleagues have got the card.
Yeah.
And continues to spiral back to block of cheese. And this time, Alice and Janny and the wolves. So again, some stunning cameos in this episode for our passionate Americans.
Yes.
Including in this little group, Nick Offerman, essentially playing sort of like a young Ron Swanson type character from Parks and Rec, and CJ being told about this particular wolf, Pluie. And Pluie's majestic journey towards Canada.
To try and find a mate that she's not too genetically close to so that she doesn't endanger the future of her species. And then CJ takes a lovely crack at the royals, being like, well, that explains a lot about Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, we love. I mean, Leigh, you and I could deep dive into the royal family for hours.
For hours.
But that's not why we're here.
No.
Shall we just take a moment for the PowerPoint that is included?
The PowerPoint is strong. I would like to give an honourable mention to the font in the PowerPoint, which is the most 90s animal rights activist font I have ever seen.
Also, the use of custom animation. Do you remember that from PowerPoint when you just added custom animation to like have your pictures like slide in?
I would also just like to add that like school gave me the impression that I was going to use PowerPoint in my adult life. And I say this as someone who was obviously like, my father devoted his life to working for Microsoft Office. So like, RIP dad, love you. I know you're rolling in your grave, but like I have never once used PowerPoint in a professional context.
It's unbelievable how much time we spent in our like IT lessons learning how to use PowerPoint.
It's crazy.
It's crazy because if anything, it's Excel that has me in a chokehold day to day.
Yeah, I would have loved more of a deep dive into Excel because that's what I do actually need the skills for, as does anyone who does taxes, which is, oh wait, the entire human population.
We find out that after CJ laughs for a long time, she does find out that the wolf is in fact dead.
Yes.
And the woman, who I don't think we ever know her name, who's giving the presentation, is so intense and so emotionally involved. And that awkwardness is just chef's kiss.
Yeah, because then CJ has to offer her condolences to the wolf, Pluie.
Yeah. I then thought we were going to have a moment of character development for Mandy, because Mandy's kind of been given this sort of Larry Posner storyline. And she's catching up with Toby in the corridor. And you think it's going to be about that, but actually she's like, hey, Toby, like just checking in. It seems like you're really stressed. And I thought, oh, that's really nice. Like maybe we're going to have a moment to develop Mandy and Toby's relationship. No. I think she's just stirring shit up, Leigh. because she says just very casually, you know what, Toby, like, don't be so stressed. I'm really glad that David Rosen passed on your job because I think you're doing a really good job at it.
Which is, even if she's unaware that Toby was unaware, is still negging.
It's negging. It's a dick move. And it makes me not trust her.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like she's out for what she can get.
Yeah.
And it also just spirals Toby into like an absolute like well of anxiety. And he's an anxious man at the best of times.
No one ever wants to hear they were second choice for the job.
No, and I really hate that from Mandy.
Yeah.
I'm glad that her and Josh aren't together. There, I said it.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Toby goes straight to CJ though, which is lovely because I love that that's like, he feels like he can confide in her. And
this
be
is
like,
the beginning of a theme that continues throughout the episode, which is that CJ, as the only high-powered woman in the office, is the emotional support animal for all of her male colleagues.
It's unbelievable. She does so much heavy lifting. So Toby goes to CJ and says, what do you know about the David Rosen situation?
Yeah.
Did he get offered my job? Did he not? Am I being crazy? Am I not?
CJ is like, well, not this again. Like, this was what you were stressed about months ago. Oh, for goodness sake, Toby. The president likes you, okay? Move on. Stop being such a... And then she calls him a paranoid nudnik. Now, I had not heard the word nudnik before, and I looked it up, and it means a pestering, nagging, or irritating person. A bore. And this is a word that I will be introducing into my everyday parlance, pending if I found out that it's in any way kind of derogatory, which it has the vibe of maybe something that it could be. But dear listener, please do let me know if this is appropriate. If this is an unacceptable word to be using in 2024.
Shall we go to Josh in therapy?
Please.
So Josh is at therapy. We see that he has a long-term relationship with a therapist, which I feel is very healthy.
Yeah.
We do find out some intense backstory.
Intense.
It's like a very big character development moment, which is that Josh has a sister who died.
Yes.
Her name was Joni. And the conclusion he comes to is that Donna reminds him of his dead sister.
I think that's what we are led to believe as the audience.
Yeah.
But yes, it transpires that when she was babysitting for him when he was 6, a popcorn maker caught on fire, and he has had, I'm going to cry, he has had long-term survivor's guilt because he ran out of the burning building and she died.
I mean, it's a really, like, the family home burning down with the sister inside it is like, that's some heavy trauma. Like,
it's something about the detail of the popcorn maker that just really gets me.
Yeah, you wrote in our notes that like you were like, I'm crying, I'm done, I'm finished here. I personally would just like to flag that the banter that he has with Donna is not brother and sister banter, or I would hope it's not. And I also really hope he never tells Donna that she reminds him of his dead sister.
I think also we might be being led down the path of thinking it's Donna, but it's actually CJ that he's thinking about.
So I get to this later on because I feel like that's my conclusion. But
I think it's just like the women in his life, potentially.
Yeah, is that he's kind of like, he's painting them with the same paintbrush, which is like, are you a replacement for my sister?
Yeah.
But I do think that it's great that he's discussing this with a professional. However, is the best way to deal with this to listen to Ave Maria, your sister's favorite song, alone in your office in the dark?
It's so intense. I have once in my life walked into a room where someone was just sitting in the dark, and it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, one that I do not wish to repeat.
Yeah, it's a lot. But I'm glad that it was CJ walking in. Again, as we said, the men of this program continually seeking emotional support and solace in the character of CJ. He does open up to her about the fact that he's received the NSC card and that like he knows that none of the others have, and he's feeling really guilty about it. And just CJ just takes it so well, you know? She just says
multiple times, you really are very sweet sometimes.
Yeah. And just talks him down really calmly. And is just a really good friend.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's really beautiful. I will say that he then turns up the music and is like, hey, listen to this bit, which for me is, as much as someone who's like, music is a love language, this is a real ick for me, is people being like, no, let's be quiet and listen to this particular part of this song.
Yeah.
I'm afraid he lost me there. I mean, CJ deals with it well and then is like, we should just go and eat some chili now.
And then CJ is like, but hun, like, you don't need to worry, like, we don't live in the Cold War. And then Josh, terrifyingly, is like, no, it's not going to be a nuclear blast. It's going to be smallpox. It's going to, he predicts the coronavirus pandemic.
He says it will be a global medical emergency that makes HIV look like cold and flu season. It's an incredible speech, like in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, because I'm like, Aaron Sorkin must have like poured himself like a nice glass of whiskey and leant back in his chair and been like, I called it, guys.
Yeah.
Terrifying. In the aftermath of that, CJ's just like, let's go and have some chili. Which I think confirms to me that CJ is his Joni.
Yes.
Because it's very big sister energy.
Yeah. And she is also there being like, well, of course I don't have an NSC card. Like, I'm a press secretary. I don't think press conferences are necessarily going to be like a top of the list of priorities.
So I feel like we leave Josh in like a better mental place, which is good. And we're closing out the episode with just, it's chili night with President Bartlett. He is so high on life. It's unbelievable. He's like bantering with Mrs. Landingham. He's like, Mrs. Landingham, are you drunk? And she says, no, sir. And he's like, I just like asking. What does that even mean? Like, why are you bothering this woman? Like,
he's just so excited to have his friends over.
I know, which is really sad. Because they're all just his colleagues.
Yeah.
But then I suppose you can't really can you have friends if you're the president? You probably don't have time for friends, right?
Well, this was the speech that Leo got where it was like, the president can't really have new friends, Leo. That's why he needs his old ones. I think Bartlett has just hired all his friends, basically, to work in the West Wing.
I mean, I don't hate that. We get some great kind of like wolf-based content from CJ, just like, again, satisfying details for her character of how you know, more people are killed by vending machines than wolves in the US. And Toby finally decides to have it out with Bartlett, which I feel is very adult behavior, grown men just speaking truthfully and honestly to one another, and Toby being like, would you have rather had Rosen for my job? And Bartlett being like, yes, but I was proved wrong by him, and you've proved me right. He then says, I couldn't live without you, Toby. I'd be in the tall grass. I'd be in the weeds. You are a wise and brilliant man, Toby. And that's when I cried this episode.
Yeah.
Because I don't know why I find emotional, like male emotion so affecting, but I just thought that was beautiful. If someone turned to me and said, like, without you, I'd be in the tall grass. I'd be in the weeds. Like, that's love.
I mean, I would, Fi.
Oh, thank you.
You are a wise and brilliant man.
Thank you. New character alert. We finally meet Zoe Bartlett, the president's daughter. And who is it, Leigh?
Elizabeth Moss.
It's a young Elizabeth Moss, everybody. Welcome. Come on in. Immediately, she's just like throwing punches. She says that Josh looks like death on a Triscuit, which I kind of agree, because he does look like shit, but then he's had a stressful episode. And then she and Charlie just make chili together.
She's stirring the chili. Charlie is tasting the chili. Sparks are flying. She's like, you don't need to call me ma'am. And Josh is like, she's just a girl.
She's just a girl standing in front of a boy making chili. I will have to raise people feeding people as a no-go for me.
Yeah.
Like a grown man, like Charlie can hold his own spoon. Just say, can you taste it? And let him feed himself. Please don't feed him chili. I hate it. I hate it in restaurants when people like feed each other across the table, and that's awful. I hate it in films when people are like, come taste my sauce. Come taste my marinara. Yeah. No, people can taste their own food. Please.
Yeah.
I'm glad I got that off my chest. It really bothers me. I'm shipping them. Charlie and Zoe.
100%.
Also love like kind of like behind doors, like I work for your father, we can't be together type energy. Would love that as like a long-term storyline for them.
Yeah.
Again, not reducing the West Wing to just like what romances can happen. But also, yes, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Then we get to the title again.
The most unhinged exchange between three male characters I have ever seen on television.
I don't know.
Josh walks over and is like, what are we talking about, guys?
We're talking about these women. God, we just can't get enough of these women. Is this Aaron Sorkin's way of being a feminist?
I think so. I think he's trying to make up for the fact that very rarely do we see two female characters having a conversation. Like, basically, he's trying to make up for the fact that this show does not pass the Bechdel test under any stretch of the imagination.
No.
And so he's kind of doing this like in memoriam moment.
It's for each of the in memoriam. Like, it's really like he's writing their eulogies. He's like, CJ, she's like a 50s movie star, so capable, loving, and energetic. Look at Mandy over there going punch for punch with Toby in a world that tells women to sit down and shut up. What is happening?
This is crazy.
What is happening?
This is crazy.
It's very, again, like it's very end of the Oscars. Like,
it's very Aaron Sorkin congratulating himself for what strong female characters he's written.
Yes. Yes, it is that. We also get an incredible piece of Mrs. Landingham backstory.
She lost 2 sons in Vietnam.
She lost 2 sons in Vietnam. And in 14 years, she's not missed a day's work. Like, you called that. You did say that she was someone who would never miss a day's work. But I feel like what is it? It's like she lost two sons in Vietnam, and yet she still chooses to serve her country.
Yeah. Wild.
Also, I would really, really like them to stop referring collectively to them as these women.
I'm sorry, I choked on that. It is one step away from females.
Yeah, the females in the room. I would also like to say that in the aftermath of talking about women's necks in the previous episode, these women is just, I don't know how I feel about that phraseology.
Yeah.
Also, where is FLOTUS?
Where is FLOTUS? Why is she being kept from us?
Like, Bartlett obviously ends the episode classically with a speech that no one asked for. A quick toast would have been fine, but he really gets into it. No one seems worried that he doesn't know why his wife is in Pakistan, which he references again.
No, he's just out here doing a type 5.
Just doing a type 5. Zoe got into Georgetown.
Yes.
And I had to ask you if that's a good uni.
It's a very good uni. It's not one of the Ivy Leagues, but it's an incredibly prestigious institution.
Excellent. Are we talking, is it like a creative institution or very much like political sciences?
Very much political sciences.
Okay, great for Zoe.
All that jazz.
Yeah, really good spot for, the daughter of the president. So we thought we were doing a type 5 to close the episode. Turns out, oops, actually we're recalling the Cold War.
Naturally. And it's very kind of sermon. It's very much Bartlett saying mass.
Which he loves to do. And it's like, we came here for chili.
And somehow we're ending on touching the face of God, which no one asked for.
He loves a bit of religious iconography.
He absolutely loves it.
Like bringing in the imagery right at the end, underscored by an orchestrated piece of music. And then that's just the end of the episode.
Just a classic kind of blurring of the lines between the President of the United States and Jesus.
Yes. Yeah, and that's how we close the episode, with no kind of like inkling of what might happen next week, just with like chili and a sermon.
Yeah.
Okay, quick fire questions, Leigh. Best fashion for you?
I think we've paid insufficient attention to Margaret's blow dry.
Yes, it's very flicky.
It's flicky and flippy. It's frisky and fun. But I think I do need to give it to the athleisure in the basketball game.
At a push, are we going Josh in a vest, or are we going Toby's cut off hoodie?
I'm just gonna give it to them all. I'm just gonna say the boys in their athleisure.
Okay, thank you. I accept that. Mine obviously is, we don't see it, but the image of CJ in a wet Donna Karan dress.
Yeah. Clambering out of a pool.
Every day of the week. What could a British or Irish politician never get away with?
Playing basketball.
Correct.
I don't want to see any British or Irish politician jump, really.
No.
Yeah.
And not to make fun of his height, but like Rishi Sunak is a wee man, and I don't think that a basketball court is the place for him to be.
Nor for Boris Johnson.
No, I don't want to see him move at a pace faster than a walk.
No, never.
No, never. Man, I feel like a man, Leigh.
So many to choose from here. Obviously, we had These Women. We can't get over These Women.
That's high up on the roster for me.
I think I'm going to have to give it to Let the Poets Write. He had the tools for greatness, but the voices of his better angels were shouted down by his obsessive need to win. And then Bartlett's response, you think that's what's stopping me from greatness?
Yeah, give it to Toby Ziegler. I mean, for me, it had to be, you're close with Kathy, aren't you? I haven't seen her naked, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, it's very much like the two sides of the masculinity coin there, I think.
Yeah. Just like Sam Seaborn on one end of the spectrum and then Toby Ziegler on the other.
Yes.
In terms of like our kind of big ticket bingo card items, I feel like chemical warfare and then just like feminism and women.
Yeah, but very much like 90s feminism.
Yeah, which is just like, look at her go.
Look at her being a career woman and having it all.
Yeah, we're so proud of her.
Grim.
You go, girl. And what was the moment that made you proudest to be American, Leigh?
Again, it's very much tied up in the same moment for me, with in the battle between a president's demons and his better angels. For the first time in a long while, I think we might just have ourselves a fair fight.
Yeah. I mean, iconic. I personally would like to go for my friends, my daughter, my beer, and my chili.
Yes.
Yes. Leigh, I would love to know what you're going to teach us this week.
Yes. So I have very much taken the mantle of These Women. I can't get over These Women.
Thank you.
Which was said by Leo, the chief of staff. I've taken that mantle and I've run with it, Fiona. And we're going to dive into Mark Meadows, who was the chief of staff from 2020 to 2021. So very much the chief of staff on the January 6th attack.
Okie dokie.
And his close personal aide, Cassidy Hutchinson. And
wow, not enough people called Cassidy these days.
Yes, a podcast that I listened to by some ex-Obama staffers called Pod Save America, they referred to Cassidy Hutchinson as the most Republican name of all time.
It really is, isn't it?
Yeah. So true. So I think we're going to like deep dive into Mark Meadows and his current legal woes another time, because he is very much wrapped up in a lot of the Trump indictments. But for now, let us just say that he resigned as a representative in Congress from North Carolina to accept the role of chief of staff to the president.
Of course, he's from North Carolina.
Yeah. He was a member of the House Freedom Caucus when he was in Congress. They have been likened by fellow Republicans to lemmings with suicide vests and legislative terrorists.
Wow.
A caucus basically just being like a voting bloc. So like a group that all votes together.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I have more questions about caucuses in general, but I feel like we can just put a pin in those for now.
When they formed the voting bloc in 2015, the Freedom Caucus considered naming themselves the Reasonable Nutjob Caucus.
Oh, I hate that.
To which I'll just respond, well, you said it.
Yeah.
He's also a Tea Party Republican, which the Tea Party movement is a group that emerged in 2009 that opposes general excessive taxation and government intervention in the private sector, whilst also supporting stronger immigrant controls. So it's kind of akin to UKIP.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Also, is the title of Tea Party referencing Boston Tea Party?
It is indeed, because they were advocating for like a Chicago Tea Party to go against like an Obama mortgage thing.
Okay.
In the midst of the 2008 financial crisis. So that's Mark Meadows, who was the chief of staff.
Sounds like a lovely man.
Lovely man. He himself was when after January 6th, Congress launched the January 6th committee to put on the public record what happened and why it happened.
And that committee was created by Trump? No, it would have been Biden, because Biden would have been inaugurated by then, yeah?
Biden would have been inaugurated by then, but Biden had nothing to do with this. This was something that Congress itself made happen.
Okay, so this is part of the legislative branch.
It is part of the legislative branch, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So we had the January 6th committee that was investigating into what happened on January 6th. And Mark Meadows, who was chief of staff when it happened, was held in contempt of Congress for refusing to answer questions from them. He was going to testify and had actually handed over all of his emails, all of his texts, everything. But then Trump intervened and told him not to. And so Mark Meadows towed the line and refused to. The Justice Department, however, declined to prosecute him criminally for that because the Justice Department under Biden didn't want to be seen as overly political in the same way the Justice Department under Trump had been.
Yeah, that does make sense.
He wasn't ultimately prosecuted, but he was the first White House chief of staff to be held in contempt of Congress since Watergate. And he was the first former member of Congress to ever be held in contempt of Congress.
That's insane, isn't it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Cassidy Hutchinson was basically his Margaret, if we're talking in West Wing terms.
Oh my God. Okay. Yes. Please tell me more about Cassidy. I'm heavily invested.
Yeah. So Cassidy did testify to the January 6th committee. She was 25 years old when she did that.
Oh my God.
She was 24 years old on January 6th.
Leigh, can we just take a moment to reflect on what we were doing when we were 24 years old?
Making fringe theatre.
Yeah, and like temping, doing like really soulless corporate temping.
Soulless. I was doing so much reception work.
Okay. I mean, bonkers from Cassidy.
Bonkers. But this is where it all kind of comes home to roost, because Cassidy Hutchinson came from a working class family. She was the first person in her family to go to college. She still to this day identifies as a Republican, and her official title was Special Assistant to the President. So the president has about 25 assistants, and then there are deputy assistants below that, and then just below that is Special Assistant to the President. It kind of like stage manager, deputy stage manager, assistant stage manager, right? Yeah. So that's who Cassidy Hutchinson was, but she was specifically assigned to Mark Meadows. Mm-hmm. So she, as I say, she was the Margaret to Mark Meadows's Leo.
Great.
And that podcast that I mentioned earlier in the episode, Pod Save America, that's run by ex-Obama staffers, they said after Cassidy Hutchinson's January 6th testimony in their podcast episode covering her testimony, they said, the real centers of power in the West Wing are the assistants. They know everything. They are involved in everything, at least in our White House. And each and every one of them had the highest security clearance available. They basically helped run the place. And if you want to know what's happening, you have to talk to the assistants.
Which is what we've been saying.
Which is what we've been saying this whole time.
But in reference to the Trump administration, like, that's quite terrifying because obviously, not to reduce it, but it was a wild time.
Yeah.
And so to think that there were so many people in that building that had information and so many people that had power and access, it does seem kind of crazy that we're still sitting in this like situation where half of the people are like, he and his staff need to be held accountable, and half of the other people are like, well, that just never happened.
Yeah, so they then went on to say, more important than any assistant is the people who work for the chief of staff, because every single decision that is made, political, legislative, scheduling, administrative, national security, involves the chief of staff's office. So I don't think it's surprising to anyone who ever worked in the West Wing that this individual, meaning Cassidy Hutchinson, would be so plugged in. And I think it's particularly true because in this testimony, Mark Meadows seems like a largely absent doofus. So if you needed to get something done in that office, people were clearly going to Cassidy Hutchinson.
Huh.
Which again kind of rings true for what we've seen in the West Wing, in that like Margaret, Donna, Kathy really are like the movers and shakers, like who are actually implementing, making things happen, keeping people on schedule, getting their direct report to where they need to go. So it all kind of lines up, right? But I think it cannot be overstated how vulnerable Cassidy Hutchinson was when she went to testify for the January 6th committee. Because obviously when Trump left the administration, she lost her job, and it was the only job she'd ever had. So by the time she went to testify for the January 6th committee, she had a few $100s in her checking account. Her Wi-Fi had been cut off in her apartment, and she hadn't paid rent in months. And because she came from this working class family, she originally had not been able to pay for her own lawyer. So the Trump organization had paid for her to have a lawyer. And that lawyer had advised her to basically not tell the whole truth. And then she is quoted as saying, "My conscience was bothering me." And so she found herself a new lawyer pro bono who represented her for free. And that is when she made the decision that she was, in fact, going to tell the truth, which I think for like a 25-year-old woman is incredibly brave. And it cannot be overstated how vulnerable she was and how brave of a thing that was to do.
Yeah, especially with the context of like a lot of middle-aged and above powerful men being like, this is what you're going to do. To be like, you know what, I am going to listen to my conscience. I mean, I'm sure that if I were to meet Cassidy, I would agree with none of her politics.
That was what I was just about to go on to say, is like, I'm sure that we probably disagree. I mean, I think she's a huge fan of like Ronald Reagan, for example, and the kind of old style republicanism, which I find equally as problematic as anything that Trump is doing. So we would disagree politically on everything. But having been a young woman in any kind of big organization where you are assisting people who are much more powerful than you, the bravery to go up against your old boss, let alone it being like the chief of staff to the president of the United States, is just wild.
Yeah, I've got to give her some respect for that.
Yes, absolutely. So just a quick rundown of what her testimony actually was. So on January 2nd, she said that Rudy Giuliani asked her if she was excited for January 6th. And she says in her testimony, "I went back up to our office and I found Mr. Meadows in his office on the couch scrolling on his phone. And I remember leaning in against the doorway and saying, 'I had an interesting conversation with Rudy, Mark. It sounds like we're going to the Capitol.' He didn't look up from his phone and said something to the effect of, 'There's a lot going on, Cass, but I don't know. Things might get real, real bad on January 6th.
I feel physically sick."
Yeah. On the days before the 2nd, I was apprehensive about January 6th. I had heard general plans for a rally. I had heard tentative movements to potentially go to the Capitol. But when hearing Rudy's take on January 6th and then Mark's response that evening was the first time that I remember feeling scared and nervous for what would happen on January 6th. That is 4 days prior to January 6th. Also, this is the beginning of a theme through her testimony of Mark Meadows just not looking up from his phone to talk to her.
Yeah.
Which is so grim.
It tracks.
Yeah.
God, it must have been terrifying to say that.
Yeah. Then she goes on to say, so she's talking about conversations with Pat Cipollone, who was the White House counsel. So like the lawyer advising Trump. She says, on January 3rd, Mr. Cipollone approached me knowing that Mark had raised the prospect of going up to the Capitol on January 6th. Mr. Cipollone and I had a brief private conversation where he said to me, "We need to make sure this doesn't happen. This would be a legally terrible idea for us. We have serious legal concerns if we go up to the Capitol that day." And he then urged me to continue relaying that to Mr. Meadows because it's my understanding that Mr. Cipollone thought that Mr. Meadows was indeed pushing for this along with the president.
I think what this testimony is confirming for me is like, over the next, I would say, well, it all depends on if Trump becomes president again. Let's not dwell on that. But, you know, there will be some incredible like biographies and autobiographies in our lifetime of like what it was like to work in the White House in Trump's administration.
So Cassidy Hutchinson already has a book out and we're going to hear some extracts from it.
Okay,
now.
Great.
Yeah. And then she continues to say in her official testimony before Congress, the morning of January 6th, she is leaving to go to the original rally that the march to the Capitol then started from. I saw Mr. Cipollone right before I walked out onto West Exec that morning, and Mr. Cipollone said something to the effect of, please make sure we don't go up to the Capitol, Cassidy. Keep in touch with me. We're going to get charged with every crime imaginable if we make that movement happen. And she then goes on to clarify that they were worried about obstruction of justice, defrauding the electoral count, and inciting a riot.
Correct.
Basically, I think what's fascinating about this is that this 24-year-old staffer is being leaned on to such an extent and being made to feel like it's somehow her responsibility to prevent Trump from going to the Capitol. It's just wild.
It really brings into relief that like the culture of fear that must have been in that building in terms of being like, Cipollone can't go to Mark Meadows himself. Like
I think he is going to Mark Meadows himself, but Mark Meadows is not paying attention. Therefore, Mark Meadows' Margaret, as we say, is trying to be the one in his ear. It's crazy. And now we're just going to have a brief extract from her book, which is titled Enough, which came out in September of last year.
Just a brief moment of love for the title there.
Yes. She does mention 6 different occasions on which she was treated inappropriately sexually by high-ranking members of both Congress and the West Wing.
Great.
And it's important to know for this extract that Pat Philbin is deputy counsel to the president. So we have Pat Cipollone and Pat Philbin, who are the lawyers advising Trump. This is on January 6th from Enough by Cassidy Hutchinson. Back at my desk, I hear the news break. The first rioters have breached the Capitol. They're inside. I'm registering the development as Pat Cipollone and Pat Philbin barrel past me to Mark Meadows' office. The rioters are in the Capitol, Mark. We need to go down and see the president now, Cipollone insists. Mark is a statue on his couch. He doesn't want to do anything. Pat calmly gives Mark direction. Mark, something needs to be done. People are going to die and blood is going to be on your hands. This is getting out of hand. I'm going down there. My eyes are locked on Mark. Get up. Go with Pat. Mark slowly stands, leaning against the arm of the couch and silently walks to my desk. He's clutching his eyeglasses in his fist. His knuckles are white. He sets his phones on my desk. Let me know if Jim calls, meaning Jim Jordan. Jim Jordan calls minutes later. I feel a pang of hope. 1 sec, I'll go get him. I go to the dining room. Is Mark there? I ask the valet. The valet nods. I look through the peephole and see the back of his suit. I open the door to get his attention. The group is having a heated conversation about the rioters. Mark sees me. I point at the phone screen where Jim's caller ID is visible. He comes over, takes the phone, propping the door open with his body as he talks to Jim. I take a few steps back as Mark takes my place in the doorway, and I strain to listen to both conversations. The TV in the Oval Office is blaring. The president is yelling. What's he saying? I can't make it out. I hear him say, hang, repeatedly. What's that about? Mark hands his phone back to me, the cue for me to return to my desk. Back in my office, my phone notifies me of a Trump tweet. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving the states the chance to certify the corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones that they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth. I'm struggling to process what's happening as Mark, Pat Cipollone, Pat Philbin, and Eric Hirschman stumble back into the office. I overhear their conversation and suddenly everything makes sense. They're calling for the vice president to be hanged. The president is okay with it. He doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. He thinks Mike is a traitor. This is crazy. We need to be doing something more. My phone is pinging nonstop with emails, texts, signal messages, and unanswered calls. Mark's phones are too. I am devoid of emotion as I consider what I should do. And then, letting what I just heard sink in, I'm gripped with anger and hurt. I snatch my coat. I run out of the office to the Eisenhower building. I need to check in with Mark's Secret Service detail. We need to have a plan in case the worst happens, in case this is the beginning of a coup. She was a 24-year-old assistant.
I think I need to read the book.
Yeah, I think I'm going to read the book as well.
I never thought I would defend Mike Pence, but...
yeah.
But like...
Yeah. But
Jesus.
Also even the fact that she's like, what can I do to stop this from happening?
Yeah,
Meanwhile,
the level of
all of these
responsibility.
men are just in this room. Like,
I feel really, really stressed at the idea of just like your boss always being laid on the couch in his office. I just hate that.
It's crazy. And I mean, essentially, after she testified to the January 6th committee, Cassidy Hutchinson essentially went into hiding for her own safety and wrote this book for 15 months, basically. Obviously, Trump has come out and said awful things about her. To which she responded when she was being interviewed by Rachel Maddow. He said much worse things about much better people than I am.
Ooh. Do you know what? That's a classy retort, isn't it?
Yeah.
What an interesting woman.
It's absolutely fascinating. She does say of the last few days of the Trump presidency, the final days were obviously chaotic in a number of ways. I was under the impression, and I know there were several of my colleagues that were under the impression, that how classified documents were being handled was not within proper protocol. Now, with saying that, I think it also speaks to how reckless and careless much of the administration was, not taking classified document protocol seriously a lot of the time. We've seen that with Mr. Trump as well. But specific to my experience with Mr. Meadows in the final day of the administration, I talk about it a lot in the book to shed light on how chaotic things were, but I can't really speak to what he was doing. I would leave that as a question to him.
Ooh.
And there's a quote in the book that is, I dropped the bag on Pat Cipolloni's floor. Apparently it's a Whole Foods bag, just out of interest. I dropped the bag on Pat Cipolloni's floor. Here are your classified documents back from the reporters, Mark. I didn't hide my contempt, my words rife with sarcasm. Mark and Mr. Cipollone peered into the bag. I saw Mark swallow hard. Pat shot me a piercing look. Pat agonized. Seriously, we don't have time for this. I was already walking out of his office.
Eek.
She also claims that at 11:45 on Inauguration Day, on Biden's Inauguration Day, he is inaugurated at noon. Mark Meadows was asking how quickly they could get to the Justice Department to declassify documents in the last 15 minutes of the Trump presidency. A representative from Mark Meadows responded to her book by
sure
saying,
they did.
Much of her claims in this book and about Mr. Meadows or otherwise are filled with half-truths, falsehoods, and purposefully omitting context to sell books. Cassidy Hutchinson responded by saying, I was very outspoken after January 6th about how I felt about it. Mark and I also knew that we were two different people, and that's okay. We talked about it. We would regularly joke about it, that I was more moderate than he was. But we did in large part work well together. But putting that aside, in an environment like that doesn't matter as much. In terms of his statement, I would encourage him to go and testify under oath if he thinks that what is in the book and what I have testified to under oath, which is consistent with what is in the book, he can go and testify under oath if he has strong feelings about that. I hope Mark is now doing the right thing, what I define as the right thing, which is coming forth and honoring your oath that you swore to protect your country, not your president.
Do you think this is the last that we'll see of Cassidy in politics?
I know that she has been called to several of the Trump indictments to give testimony. So we will definitely be hearing from her again as those trials get underway, 100%. Unfortunately, I don't think anyone who has done what she has done will ever be in any kind of Republican office. And currently she does obviously
very
still
much
identify as a
with
Republican.
The Republicans.
Yeah. But I just felt like, given that this episode was so focused on like these women and like also obviously the Mrs. Landingham of it all, and obviously having the lovely Kathy and Donna, I thought it was really important to highlight a woman that was in a similar role in the last presidential administration. And also like just justice for the EAs, justice for the assistants. The world would literally stop turning without them.
Undoubtedly after all of that. Jesus.
And she very much stood alone. Like no other staff really from the West Wing testified.
No, I do rate her for that. It's that very difficult thing where you're like, intellectually, I don't agree with your politics in any way. But it's kind of reassuring that even though we would disagree from a political standpoint, like there is some sort of moral backbone.
100%. And like, obviously, you know, we've both had diabolical moments at work with various, you know, like floods, etc., that have happened, or
physical
the famous time,
physical floods.
The famous time that our good friend had an archaeological dig in the middle of her set. So you know, we know what it is, I suppose, to have work stress, but I just cannot imagine being 24 and being like, there might be about to be a coup and it might be my problem.
Yeah. And I might need to try and stop it.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I can't get over that story. I'm gonna read more about Cassidy, I think.
Yeah.
It feels really now kind of crazy to be like, what are your predictions for next week's episode? Especially given the notes I have for my prediction, like after hearing all about the like moment by moment responses to January 6th, for me to be like, when are we going to meet FLOTUS? But yes, Leigh, do you have any predictions for next week's episode?
I feel like we were foregrounding FLOTUS so much more in this episode. I have been predicting that we're going to meet FLOTUS for like the last 3 episodes, but I really feel like FLOTUS might be coming. And also I feel like FLOTUS coming will give me the opportunity to do the Hillary Clinton deep dive that I've obviously been chomping at the bit to do from like moment one.
Also just like for most of your life.
Yeah.
You love a deep dive research, don't you, Leigh?
I do. I really do. And I'm so glad that we've been EA focused today.
Yeah. I'm hoping that we're going to have that, like Zoe's on her like holidays before she starts college, and I hope that we're going to have more Charlie Zoe time.
Definitely.
And my hope is that I guess we'll maybe like dig into like a new big issue that might be like a multi-episode arc.
Yes.
As we're kind of like hitting what will be episode 6.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we come back around to Leo and Jenny's drama.
Yeah, the separation / divorce.
Yeah.
And like what it's going to be like for that to become public at work.
Yeah.
Because heretofore, no one knows but Hoynes.
Yeah, I also would be fascinated. I don't know if we're going to get this, but like I would be fascinated to see like CJ have a romantic subplot play out, because I'd find it fascinating to see. Obviously, like I want her to be gay. Realistically, I know she's not going to be gay, but like it would be fascinating to see like how a male character might respond to dating a woman who has A, such like public facing, and B, powerful career and job. And I'd just love to see her like get to date and like have a personal life.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of a missing piece. We are getting a lot of kind of, we're learning a lot more about Josh. We've learned a lot about Sam. And I think we've been touching a little bit more on kind of like Toby's life outside of the office in terms of like his emotional well-being, etc. But we haven't really spent a lot of time with like, what does CJ do when she's not being an absolute boss at work?
Yeah.
Like we got that like 30 seconds of the treadmill-based comedy in the pilot.
So we do know that she's single because she's
hitting on that guy. Yeah. Obviously, like she likes to have fun, hence being pushed into a swimming pool by Roberto Benigni. We know she likes to have fun. So yeah, I think I just want to see like CJ in a bar, just like having a drink and just like chatting with some friends, or, you know, I don't know. I just, yeah. So we'll see.
Fun in the #1 place for fun in the West Wing. What is that jingle?
I don't know, Leigh.
I think it might be a jingle for like a Seattle casino that was often on around the time of The Bachelor.
I feel like we should close with a classic reminder that there are no stupid questions here at Queer Gals Watch the West Wing. So
yeah, if you've come across a news headline and you like want to understand what's going on, but you don't know all or some of the words or who the people are involved, I will do my best to give a kind of
sense of clarity, perhaps.
A sense of clarity and just like the basics.
Yeah, the ABCs of American politics is all I'm asking for. Like, you know, I feel like I'm 25% of the way there with understanding what a caucus is, but there is ground to be covered, Leigh. So yeah. So if you do,
I just think it's tough because so many of the news headlines like have so much assumed knowledge, and they don't give you like the background of who someone is, or what a term means.
And not to get political, but I do feel like that's done on purpose so that people feel like it's not in news that they can engage with, and therefore they are less politically aware, and therefore their voting choices are made based on less knowledge. But that's just me.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
It's almost as if, they get us hung up on stuff like reality TV and how we should look so that we don't engage politically. Funny. Is it a conspiracy? Maybe.
Go out and vote, kids.
Yeah, so if you do have a stupid question, do feel free to contact us on our socials or via our Gmail account. We are
at Queer Gals Watch on everything, and we are queergalswatch@gmail.com.
Yeah, so pop us a message. And we really thank you for listening, because, I feel like I'm learning things and having fun. So I hope that you are too.
Yes, just remember always, to my hands out there, to breathe, make a cup of tea, preferably not with almond milk. And just remember that, like, Jesus loves us
chili.
all.
You can make chili.
Yes, and maybe make some chili. It's heartwarming food.
And you can have it with your friends, your daughter, and your beer.